Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Predaplant Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for post the Legendary Duelist Season 3. I guess you could also count this as an update to the deck post the May 2022 ban list, with the Vert Anaconda Link Monster finally on the ban list. We did make some changes to the deck for its overall playstyle. It is a heavily fusion-based deck, which you can use all of the many different Predaplant monsters to put Preda counters on your opponent's monsters to gain additional monster effects based on which monsters have counters, along with the new support we got from the Dimension Force booster pack, and along with the fact that in the Legendary Duelist Season 3, plenty of the Predaplant cards were reprinted to make the deck more readily available and easy to build. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters. A lot of the monsters haven't changed since the last deck update. We're still running the 3 of the new Predaplant Bufolicula, with this card being a scale 0. You can even pendulum summon out scale 1 monsters. If it's sent to the graveyard or added to the extra deck face up because it was used as fusion material, you can add 1 face up dark pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand. And from the pendulum scale, you can fusion summon 1 dark fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. You can only use this effect of Bufolicula once per turn. It works very, very well with our next Predaplant monster, which is Predaplant Triantis. When this card's in your pendulum zone, if you were to fusion summon a dark fusion monster, you can also use this card in your pendulum zone as a monster on the field as material for the fusion summon. So with this card being able to use it as material as the card to fusion summon, you can also use cards in both pendulum zones. So you can also use the Bufolicula if it was in your other zone, giving you the 2 monsters needed to go into your fusion of choice. With the last pendulum monster I run, I just run 1 Predaplant Spider Orchid, another scale 8 option. During your main phase, if this card was activated this turn, you can target 1 other face-up card in the spell and trap card zone, destroy it. You can only use this effect of Spider Orchid once per turn, so just an option to get rid of some cards in the spell and trap card zone that your opponent may have, or just setting up your scales for the pendulum summon, which the deck can potentially do. I just run 1 though. I feel like that's all you need for the pendulum setup. For the other 3 ofs that I run for the main deck effect monsters, I just run 3 Predaplant Orpheus Scorpio. If it's normal or special summon, you can send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard to special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck, except for Orpheus Scorpio. You can only use this effect once per turn. So the main target with this card will be the Darlington Cobra, which can give you a fusion card to your hand. So very, very useful there. And with it just being able to be special summon, you can also summon it out onto the field with cards like Lone Fire Blossom that much easily. For some of the lower numbers, I run the 2 Predaplant Biblis. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 Predaplant monster from your deck to your hand, except for Biblis. And if a monster with a Predator counter is on the field, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use each effect of Biblis once per turn. But another option to send off of the Orpheus Scorpio from your hand for the discard cost, because then you can just special summon the Biblis back onto the field as a resource, as long as your opponent's card has a Predaplant counter, which we have plenty of monsters and spells to help with that play, and extra deck monsters. I also run 2 Clemensandu for the Predaplant lineup. Monsters with a Predator counter that you use as fusion materials are treated as dark. And during your main phase, you can fusion summon 1 dark fusion monster from your extra deck using cards on the field, and monsters from your hand field, and or monsters with a Predator counter on your opponent's field as fusion material, making it sort of like a super poly main deck monster to use your opponent's monsters, because they will be treated as dark attribute. So then you can use them for summoning out some cards like your Predaplant Chimera Felicia, or even using them for your Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. And for the 1-ofs for the Predaplants, I run 1 Predaplant Darlington Cobra and the 1 Predaplant Sarancion for the special summon destruction power for special summoning with Sarancion. And I already spoke of Darlington Cobra before. If it's special summoned by the effect of a Predaplant monster, you can add 1 polymerization spell or fusion spell card from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect once per duel. That's why you only run 1 copy of this card, because once you special summon it off of the Orpheus Scorpio, you'll have your search, and multiple copies won't really do much else for you. For the rest of the monsters that we run in the main deck, I run the 3 Lone Fire Blossom. This is pretty staple in the deck just because it can get out any of the Predaplant monsters from your main deck onto the field. And most of the time you will go for Orpheus Scorpio for its own setup plays, or you can even just go Lone Fire into Lone Fire to thin out the deck and then get out the final special summon card. With the rest of the monsters for the main deck, I run 3 Ash Blossom and 2 Effect Veiler just for the rest of the main decks for hand trap options to stop my opponent. Very, very preferable and not really limited to any of the special summon power with this deck. So you can still use hand traps or monster effects and not have any limitations for any of the Predaplant monsters. And that is it for the main deck monsters. Moving on now to the spells. I run 3 Preda Practice. I know this was a pretty expensive card for a while, but it is reprinted in the Legendary Duelist Season 3 box, so much more readily available for people looking to build this deck. You special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your hand, then add 1 Predap card from your deck to your hand, except for Preda Practice. Also, for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon from the extra deck except for fusion monsters. You can only activate 1 Preda Practice per turn. So you have plenty of search options with this card as well. Being able just to set up a monster on the field, because there are cards that require you have 3 monsters, including Predaplant Yugioh, needing 3 dark monsters on the field, or even your go-to one, which is your Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, which needs 2 dark monsters on the field except for tokens. And then for the other Predap cards you can search, I run 1 Predap Pruning. This is a special summon card. Basically like a Premature Burial, you target a Predaplant monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and equip it with this card. 1 Predap Blast. For more of the Predap cards in your hand, you reveal any number of them in your hand, then target the number of cards faceable on the field your opponent controls, and place a Predator counter on each one. This will be good for setup with your Clemencendu, being able to then use that monster for a fusion resource. And lastly, 1 Predaponics. Once per turn, you can special summon 1 level 4 lower Predaplant monster from your hand or graveyard, but negates effects, and during each standby phase, you pay 800 life points to destroy this card. But all these cards are searchable thanks to Preda Practice. That's why we're only running 1 of copies of each. Both utilize in the play you may need them for that specific situation. The same for the one-ofs come into play with for Scorpio, being able to search out a good amount of them. So the 1 Polymerization for the search option and easy fusion play from our hand. The 1 Greater Polymerization. I really do like this card in the deck. You fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using 3 or more monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. If you do, it gains these effects. It cannot be destroyed by card effects, and if it attacks a defense monster, inflict piercing bow damage. That can make a pretty big boss monster depending on which Predaplant monster we try to go for in the deck. And also 1 Ultra Polymerization to give us more resources on the field. This was very, very useful when Vert Anaconda was, usable in the deck, because then you could just use those 2 monsters you summon back to summon that monster out. But still, it's good for extending the fusion plays with our additional resources we get out. And the 1 Instant Fusion, you can summon out your Predaplant Ambilio Melodies for this card, and then just have the fusion requirement needed for your Starving Venom Predapower Fusion Dragon, needing 1 Dark Fusion monster and 1 Fusion monster, and one of those required is just brought out right with this card. For the rest of the fusion option plays, I also run 2 Super Polymerization. This card is incredibly good in the deck. We do run the option of Mud Dragon of the Swamp, just needing 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types. So any dark attribute monster that your opponent may have can easily be used to make this card using your Super Polymerization. And the last spell that I run in the deck is just the 1 Call by the Grave, just another preference for shutting down my opponent's hand traps to make sure a lot of my special summons resolve, especially Lone Fire Blossom and the Search Power with for Scorpio. And then for the traps, the only trap that I run in the deck is Infinite Impermanence, just another good option, just like Ash Blossom and Effect Veiler, if you do have to go second against your opponent to stop any of their card effects on the field. And then you can utilize that monster that stays on the field that has effect negated unless your opponent finds a way to use it for their own plays for your own Predaplant summons. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. For the boss monsters, I run 1 Starving Venom Predapower Fusion Dragon. You need 1 Dark Fusion monster and 1 Fusion monster. It's always treated as a Predaplant card. Once per turn, when a card or effect is activated, quick effect, you contribute 1 monster or either field with a Predator counter. And if you do, negate the activation. If a fusion summon you control is set to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can target 1 dark monster in your graveyard, special summon it. You can only use each effect of Starving Venom Predaplant Fusion Dragon once per turn. So you have the negation and the special summon power thanks to this card. Also having 3,600 attack makes for a pretty big boss monster for sure to utilize. And then also your opponent will just want to either use their Predator counter covered monsters or you'll use them yourself against your opponent. I also run the 1 Trivovertum. This one's one of my favorites to use, with not only being able to use Super Polymerization, my opponent's own dark monsters to make it, but also being able to use Greater Polymerization with 3 monsters on the field to get this card out, and then having the additional option for Piercing piercing battle damage and extra protection with it. I also run the 2 Predaplant Yugioh melodies, needing 2 Predaplant monsters. If this card's fusion summoned, you can add 1 Predaplant monster or 1 Predap spell or trap from your deck, graveyard, or face up in the extra deck to your hand. Then you can target 1 monster your opponent controls with a Predator counter, or 1 monster you control, tribute it, and if you do, special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck. Giving you that resource can also come in handy with this play, being the fusion summon of your instant fusion, just to give you a monster on the field to then utilize one of your own opponent's monsters for that play of the Predator counter. I also run the 1 Chimera Rafflesia. This was a pretty pricey card as well, but it was reprinted in the Season 3 Legendary Duelist, making it more readily available. Needing a Predaplant monster and 1 Dark monster, having more of a destruction option once per turn. You can target 1 monster on the field with a level less than or equal to this card's and banish it. So just a good way to clear the field with the additional Predator counter also. And I also run the 2 Predaplant Dragostapelia, more of a powerhouse option in the deck, just needing a fusion monster and 1 Dark monster. Once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, place 1 Predator counter on it, and if it's a level 2 or higher, it becomes level 1, as long as it has the Predator counter, and negate the activated effects of your opponent's monster that has that Predator counter. Also, 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, 1 Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon, and 1 Starving Venomy Dragon for additional boss monsters to get out. These are the main cards used by Yuri, and just for the more attack options with each one, and being able to go into Starving Venom with Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon, just needing a Predaplant monster and 1 Dark monster whose original level is 8 or higher. So with that, and Venomy Dragon for the additional option of using your Pendulum Scale with this card as well. For more of the generic fusions, we have the 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp to use with Super Polymerization in our opponent's cards if they don't have the Predator counter. And also, for the Link monsters, I run 1 Link Karibo. For the level 1 monsters, it can pop up as just an easy protection against our opponent. The 1 Dark Charmer, with more Dark attributes to use. It's more resources for you to then summon out other cards like Nightmare Phoenix and also Nightmare Unicorn. And then as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, being able to set up the Pendulum Scale is a very big part of it, because then you could just use your Bufolicula and your Triantis to use both of them for the fusion play, setting up both of them in the Pendulum Scale. And having 2 Pendulum monsters, you can then summon out your Embellium Melodies. With this card, you then can activate the effects for your Bufolicula if it's sent to the graveyard or add to the extra deck. Because of a fusion material, you can add 1 face-up Dark Pendulum from your extra deck to your hand, adding back the Triantis to your hand. If it's sent to the graveyard or add to the extra deck because it was used as fusion material, choose monsters on the field up to the number of monsters you control, and that'll place the Predator counters for you to use with your Embellium Melodies as your own opponent's monsters to give you another special summon on the deck, which can even be the Triantis you added back with the Bufolicula to your hand, giving you 1 additional monster on the field to summon out. And the other play to use would be with your option of your Orpher Scorpio when it's summoned out onto the field to discard another card. If you discard your Biblisp, it's even better, because then you can add 1 Predaplant monster from your deck to your hand if it's sent to the graveyard. So with that discard off Orpher Scorpio, you can also then special summon out your Darling Tanya Cobra. The Cobra will give you the search for a fusion card. And then with Biblisp, if a monster with a Predator counter is on the field, which can also be used by activating the Predapractus to then search out your Predaplast to activate, giving you the Biblisp as a special summon, then using the Greater Polymerization with your 3 monsters on the field to special summon out your Trivial Veritum, with needing 3 monsters on the field as the bigger boss monster with its own additional card effects when your opponent special summons a monster, or if your opponent controls a monster with a Predator counter, to summon it back on the field. But the big play will be its piercing damage it can do and the protection from being destroyed by card effects thanks to your Greater Polymerization. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Like I said, this deck will definitely be easier to build with the latest Legendary Duelist Season 3, making a lot of the cards more available. A lot of them were pretty budget-friendly from the Dimension Force set as well, and always sad to see, decks that were affected by people abusing the meta, in this case, Vert Anaconda, being used for every other fusion play, and sadly hurt the power of the Predaplant deck because of it. But it's happened to other decks before, and we'll just have to see. Maybe one day, just like they're doing with Gem Knights, they'll give us another card that can readily support the Predaplant deck while being not so, abused in the actual Yu-Gi-Oh meta. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.